The stones moved on their own. That was the first thing Davan noticed. He had come to the nesting ridge the same way he came every third week, boots laced tight, datapad under his arm, a quiet kind of dread sitting in his chest. Not because the Dreekies scared him. They did, a little, but mostly because he never knew what to say to them, and silence between species always felt like something waiting to go wrong. The nesting grounds sat on the southern ridge of the colony, where the wind came in long and low off the mountain range. The Dreeki had chosen that spot before any human had set foot on Vorna. When the accord was signed, the grounds were marked on every colony map with a border and a note. Approach only on designated paths. Do not touch the nests. Do not make loud sounds. Davan followed the path. He always did. He was halfway along the upper trail when the sound reached him. A scraping, slow and careful, like someone arranging furniture in another room. He stopped. Below the trail, set into a wide natural shelf of dark stone, was the smallest of the active nests. It belonged to a hatchling Sora, the younger Dreeki called her, though Davan had only heard the name once, from Yessa, the Dreeki scholar who sometimes came to the colony office to file paperwork for the elders. Yessa had mentioned Sora in passing, said she was curious, said she asked too many questions even by hatchling standards. Sora was not asking questions now. She was working. She was silver gold in the afternoon light, her scales catching the sun in a way that made her look less like an animal and more like something a jeweler had built. She was small for a Dreeki, barely the height of a draft horse at the shoulder, but her movements were deliberate and careful. Her right forklaw was pressing something flat and smooth into a hollow she had scraped between three large hearthstones at the base of her nest. She pressed it once, adjusted it, pressed again. Then she covered it. She pulled obsidian gravel over the hollow with the side of her claw, smoothing it out in slow strokes until the surface looked undisturbed. She sat back, looked at it for a moment. Then she lowered her head and made a sound, low, vibrating, steady. It moved through the stone and up through the path under Davan's boots. Not threatening, not a growl, something else entirely. He had heard that sound described once, in a cultural briefing that most of the colonists had slept through. The Dreeki protective hum. They made it over things they were keeping safe. Davan did not move until Sora stood, shook out her wings once, and bounded off the north side of the shelf to chase something on the rocks above. A bird, maybe, he couldn't see. He waited another full minute. Then, quietly, he stepped off the path. He knew he wasn't supposed to. The rule was clear, but he stopped 2 meters from the nest, close enough to see the newly smoothed gravel, and he crouched down and looked. At the edge of the hollow, not quite fully buried, a corner of something stuck up through the gravel. It was laminated, flat, white at the edge with a faint printed border. A photograph. He could see a slice of it, a strip of color, blue sky, the curve of a shoulder, the edge of a face. A human face. He did not touch it. He stood up, stepped back onto the path, and walked the rest of the route on automatic, his datapad untouched under his arm. When he got back to the colony office, he sat at his desk and opened the personnel registry. He went through every current resident, every long-term visitor, every contractor on record. He sketched the face from memory on a notepad, the angle of the jaw, the set of the eyes, the way the light had fallen on the shoulder in the photograph. He posted it colony-wide before dinner. Does anyone recognize this individual? Please contact the administrator's office. 3 days passed, no reply. On the 4th morning, Brix was sitting in the chair across from Davan's desk before Davan had even hung up his coat. Brix was the oldest human on Vorna by active service. He had hands like old tools and a face that had been weathered into something close to stone. He was not a man who showed up without a reason. He looked at the sketch on Davan's desk for a long time. Then he sat down, put his hands on his knees and said, "Close the door." Brix did not talk the way most people talked. He did not warm up to a subject. He did not tell you where he was going before he took you there. He just started, and you kept up or you didn't. Her name was Kala, he said. She came on the second wave. 14 years ago, maybe 15, I was already here. She showed up with a medical kit, 2 bags, and a look on her face like she had already decided something about this place before she landed. Davan folded his hands on the desk. He did not reach for his datapad, he just listened. She was a medic, colony-certified, wilderness-trained, smart, stubborn in the way that quiet people are stubborn, which is the worst kind. Brix paused, looked at the wall. She chose her quarters herself, requested the eastmost unit, the one that looks out over the ridge. The nesting grounds. Yes. Davan waited. Nobody asked her to do what she did, Brix said. That's the thing you need to understand first. Nobody assigned her to it. The accord said we leave them alone, they leave us alone. That was the agreement. Kala read the accord, put it down, and started learning Dreeki words out of a linguistics file she found in the colony archive. It was a bad file, outdated. Half the pronunciations were wrong. She used them anyway. Did it cause problems? Once she said the word for good weather, and it came out closer to the word for your scales are dull. An elder stared at her for about 10 seconds. Brix's mouth moved, not quite a smile. Kala apologized in colonial speech and bowed her head, which is not a Dreeki gesture, but the elder seemed to understand the spirit of it. After that, they left her alone in a different way, less like ignoring her, more like watching. Davan looked at the sketch on the desk. What happened with the nesting grounds? Brix was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was slower. In the 3rd year after she arrived, the first Dreeki clutch of the colony era was laid. 3 eggs, big event. The elders hadn't nested this close to a human settlement in recorded history. Everyone was nervous. Colony leadership told people to stay back, stay quiet, act normal. He stopped. Kala stayed up for 3 nights on the ridge, not inside the boundary, on the path just outside it, sitting there in her coat with a thermos of something hot and her med kit beside her. Why? Because one of the eggs was struggling. She could hear the difference in the sound. She told me later the shell hum from that egg was wrong, lower than the others. She had read everything she could find about Dreeki nesting. She didn't know if there was anything she could do. She went anyway. Davan said nothing. On the 2nd night, the mother came to the edge of the boundary and looked at her, just looked. Kala looked back. Neither of them moved for a long time. Then the mother went back to the nest. Brix rubbed one hand over his face. The egg didn't make it. 3rd night, it just went quiet. The office was very still. Kala asked through Yessa, who was younger then, just starting to translate. She asked if she could help bury it. Proper Dreeki right. The mother considered it for 2 days. Then she said yes. Davan looked up. Kala went in, did what she was told to do, said the words she had been taught, placed the stones the right way. Brix stopped again. He looked at the far corner of the room. She cried. She wasn't performing it. She just cried, the way you do when something small and new doesn't get a chance. The mother watched her the whole time. What did the mother do? Nothing, she just watched. He paused. That was the point, I think. She saw it was real. Davan looked at the sketch of the face on his desk, the angle of the jaw, the light on the shoulder. Kala died 6 years after that, Brix said. Fever, fast. She was gone in 8 days. I had a photograph of her. A few of us did. When her family came from the transit hub to collect her things, I gave mine to them. I thought that was the last one on Vorna. Apparently not. Apparently not. Brix finally looked directly at him. But here is what I can't work out. Sora was not hatched when Kala was alive. That hatchling is 2 seasons old at the most. Kala has been dead for 6 years. So how does a 2-season-old hatchling have a photograph of a woman who died before it was born, and why is it burying that photograph like it's the most important thing it owns? Davan did not answer. He didn't have one. Brix stood up slowly, the way old men stand, deliberately. Like each joint needs to be consulted, he put his cap back on. You should talk to the elder, he said. Rel, she's been on this ridge longer than either of us has been on this planet. If there's an answer, she has it. He moved toward the door, then stopped without turning around. Kala would have been embarrassed by all this fuss. She didn't do any of it to be remembered. He left, the door closed behind him. Davan looked at the sketch for a long time after that. Then he picked up his datapad and sent a message to Yessa asking for a formal meeting with the elder of the nesting grounds. He did not expect a quick reply. He was right. Yessa was not nervous around the elder. She had grown up in the overlap, born to Driki parents who lived adjacent to the colony, raised on the grammar of two species. She knew how to be still in the way the Driki respected, and she knew how to speak plainly in the way humans needed. She existed in the middle, and she had made her peace with that a long time ago. But she was careful, walking up to Rel's position on the high shelf that morning. Careful the way you are careful near very old things. Rel was enormous, not in the dramatic way of a Driki warrior. She had no armor scales, no battle-scarred ridges. She was enormous the way mountains are enormous, settled, present, like she had been placed there by something larger than opinion. Her scales were deep blue-green, the color of still water in a cave, and they had faded at the edges to a pale silver that only came with great age. She did not look at Yessa when Yessa arrived. She was watching the eastern sky. Yessa sat at the appropriate distance and waited. After a long while, Rel spoke. She did not ask why Yessa had come. She did not ask about Davan or the investigation or the photograph. She said, "I will tell you a thing. Whether you tell the human is your decision." "I will tell him," Yessa said. "Yes," Rel said, "I thought so." She was quiet again for a moment. A wind moved across the shelf, carrying the smell of the lower forest, pine sap, and cold stone. 9 years ago, Rel began, a section of the East Rock shelf collapsed. Old fault. It had been cracking for some time. A work party went to clear the rubble so the path would be safe. They were Driki workers, young ones, strong. She paused. Under the rubble they found objects. Yessa did not move. Human objects, a medical kit sealed against weather, a fire-starting stone wrapped in cloth, a small tin of dried herbs, the kind humans use in their food. Rel's great head turned slightly. Inside the tin, wrapped in a cloth of its own, was a laminated photograph. Yessa felt something move through her, slow and certain, like a tide. The objects had not been lost, Rel said. They were placed. The arrangement was deliberate. They were nestled into a hollow in the rock, covered with stone in a pattern. She stopped. In our pattern. Yessa knew what that meant. Root gifting, the sacred burial. You did not arrange stones that way by accident. You had to know what you were doing. The workers brought the objects to the elder overseeing the clearing, Rel continued. She did not know the correct action. Human objects, buried as sacred things, found in Driki territory. The Accord had no instruction for this. She brought them to me. When did you know whose they were? I suspected when I saw the photograph. I knew when I read the symbols pressed into the tin lid. Rel made a sound low in her chest, not quite a word. She had pressed the Driki mark for "I was here" into the metal, badly done. The tool she used was not right for the material, but the intention was clear. Kala Yessa already knew it. She said the name aloud anyway, quietly. Yes, Rel said. She buried it herself. She buried herself, Rel said. In effigy, her photograph, her tools, things that said, "This is what I was, this is what I did with my hands, this is my face so you know I was a specific person and not a general idea." She paused. She did not do it so we would find it. She did not leave a message asking us to. She buried it because she believed the ground holds what is given to it. She did it because it was the truest thing she knew how to do. Yessa was quiet for a moment. Why did you give the photograph to Sora? Rel looked at her directly for the first time. Her eyes were pale gold, the color of very old honey, because Sora was born with the Nest Keeper's sense. She will hold things, she will guard things, she needed something to begin with. Rel looked away again. We do not explain everything to hatchlings. We give them a weight to carry, and we watch what they do with it. And what did she do? She buried it under her nest the third day she had it, without being told, without knowing the story. Rel's voice held something that was not pride but was near it. She felt what it was. That is enough. Yessa sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "The human administrator has been careful. He found the photograph but did not touch it. He did not come to you demanding answers. He asked through proper channels and waited." "Yes," Rel said, "I have been watching." "Does that matter to you?" Rel was quiet for long enough that Yessa thought she might not answer. Then He does not take what is not offered to him. He asks before he assumes. These are not small things. She folded her great forelegs slowly. He is learning, at his age for his kind, that is worth noticing. Yessa stood to leave. She was 3 steps away when Rel spoke again, without turning. Tell him also this. She buried her cash 14 years ago. She had not yet been on Vorna for 1 full season. She did not wait to see if she was accepted first. The elder's voice was low and even. She gave without being asked. That is the version of a person worth keeping. Yessa walked back down the path with her hands clasped and her throat tight. She had a lot to translate. The colony archive smelled like old plastic and recycled air. Oren liked it that way. He had spent 11 years in that room, and the smell had become something close to comfort, the scent of information that had been sitting quietly, waiting for someone to need it. Davan had asked him to find everything on a woman named Kala, medic, second wave, died 6 years ago of a fever. Oren had nodded, asked no follow-up questions, and turned to his terminal. That was why Davan trusted him. Oren did not ask questions when he had tools that answered them better. He started with the personnel file. Date of arrival, qualifications, assigned duties, medical log, residential record, date of death. All clean, all standard. He printed it and set it aside. Then he found her personal archive submission, and he sat up a little straighter in his chair. Colony protocol required all residents to file personal notes on a quarterly basis if those notes related to interspecies relations, safety concerns, or colony operations. Most people filed nothing. Kala had filed 31 documents over 4 years. Oren opened the first one. It was dated 11 days after her arrival. It was not a formal report. It read more like someone thinking out loud on paper, careful and precise, but personal in a way that bureaucratic documents were not supposed to be. She had written down the first 3 Driki words she had learned. She had noted which elder had a habit of patrolling the south path at dusk. She had written, the juveniles play a chasing game near the thermal vents after midday. It looks like a game. I am choosing to assume it is a game because assuming otherwise would make me afraid, and I don't want to be afraid of them before I have a reason. Oren read that sentence twice. He went through the documents in order. They were not dramatic. They were meticulous. She had noted which calls were danger warnings and which were social sounds. She had written down the Driki term for the mountain range in the north because, she said, the Driki used it as a directional reference in conversation, and if she was going to understand what they were actually saying, she needed to know the landmarks they thought in. She had recorded that a juvenile Driki named in the files as the yellow-scale youngster near Rock 7 had been limping for 3 days, and she had left a container of mineral-rich water near the thermal area after reading that mineral deficiency caused joint stiffness in young Driki. She had not told anyone she was doing it. She had not reported it. She had just noted it in her archive, matter of fact, like a gardener writing down when she watered something. The limping stopped after 5 days. She had noted that too. Oren kept reading. In the 12th document, she described the night she sat on the path outside the nesting boundary, the struggling egg, the long silence. The mother Driki coming to the boundary edge and looking at her. Kala had written, I do not know what she was deciding. I know I sat very still and tried to look like someone who meant no harm, which is harder than it sounds when you are sitting very still in the dark, while something much larger than you decides what it thinks of you. Oren stopped reading. He looked at the wall. After a moment, he kept going. In the final document in the archive, filed 8 months before Kala's death, which meant she was already sick when she wrote it, though she made no mention of it, she had listed the contents of a cache she intended to bury near the second ridge shelf, south face, under the orange lichen. She wrote the inventory like a shipping manifest, medical kit, firestone, dried herbs, 1 photograph, self-portrait laminated, 1 tin with the Driki mark for presents pressed into the lid. At the bottom she had written her reason, plain and short. I do not know if they will find it. I do not know if it will matter to them, but I have learned that they consider what is buried as what is real. The ground is their record. If I am to be honest about what this place has meant to me and what I have tried to do here, then I should put it in the ground. That is the honest thing, not a plaque, not a ceremony, the ground. And below that, one more line. I stayed because it was right to stay. I hope the ground remembers that. Oren sat at his desk, in the old plastic smell of the archive, for a long time after that. He did not move. He was a man who prided himself on composure, on the quiet, reliable neutrality of someone who worked with facts rather than feelings. He did not quite manage that this time. When he finally printed everything and put it in a folder for Davan, he added one note of his own on a slip of paper clipped to the front. It said, also found, a list she kept of individual Driki she had observed over 4 years, 22 names. Each entry includes a small personal detail. Rel is entry 7. Kala's note reads, Rel watches everything. I think she is deciding something. I think she has been deciding it for a long time. I would like to know the answer. He paused, pen still in his hand. Then he wrote below it, in smaller letters, his own addition. She found out. He clipped the note to the folder and left it on Davan's desk before Davan returned from the ridge. He went back to the archive and did not tell anyone how long he had sat there before finishing the work. The approval came back in 11 days, which Yessa said was fast for a formal nest approach request. The elder Rel had considered it, which in Driki process meant she had slept on it, watched the weather, and consulted no one, because when you were Rel's age, you had already heard every argument and did not need to hear them again. The conditions were simple. Davan would approach on foot, no datapad, no recording instruments. He would stand at the marked distance and speak through yes, sir. He would not ask to see the photograph. He would not ask to touch the nest. If Sora chose to end the conversation at any point, he would leave immediately and without question. Davan agreed to all of it without negotiating. The morning was cold. The ridge held a thin layer of frost that crunched under his boots, and the sky was the pale white of a day that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. Yessa walked ahead, moving with the quiet ease of someone who had done this all her life. Davan kept pace, said nothing. Sora was on her shelf when they arrived. She had been there a while. She was not in the alert posture of something that had just arrived, but the settled, low-weight posture of something that had been waiting and was fine with waiting. Her silver-gold scales caught the pale light and gave nothing dramatic back. She looked smaller than Davan remembered. Then she turned her head and looked at him, and she looked larger again. Yessa greeted her in Driki, a series of low sounds and a dip of the chin. Sora answered in kind. Yessa turned to Davan and said quietly, "She knows why you came. She is not troubled by it." Davan nodded. He looked at Sora, who was looking back at him with the patient, specific attention that Driki gave things they were genuinely interested in, not the wide, suspicious scan of an animal deciding whether to run, something more focused than that. He said, "Does she know who the person in the photograph is?" Yessa translated. Sora was still for a moment, then she spoke. It was longer than Davan expected, a low, careful string of sound that rose and fell with something that felt like weight. Yessa translated slowly. She says she is the one who stayed when staying was not required. She is the one who learned the burying. She put herself into the ground so we would know she was serious about being here. Yessa paused, listening as Sora added something. That is how we know a promise, she says, not words, the burying. Davan stood with that for a moment. Ask her, he said, why she keeps it under her nest. Yessa asked. Sora's answer was shorter this time, and when Yessa translated it, her voice was very careful. She kept watch over an egg that did not live. I keep watch over her face. It is the same thing. The wind moved across the shelf. Somewhere above them, a bird called once and went quiet. Davan looked at the hearthstones at the base of Sora's nest, the smooth obsidian gravel, the ground that looked like it had never been disturbed. He had read Kala's archived documents the night before, alone in his office after Oren had gone home. He had read all 31 of them. He was not a man who cried as a rule, not because he was hard, but because he generally managed to keep himself a step removed from things that might require it. He had not managed that last night. He looked at Sora now, and tried to think of something appropriate to say, something that honored what she was doing and what it meant, and what the woman whose face was buried under those stones had been. He could not find the words. So he said, "Tell her she is doing something good." Yessa started to translate. Sora watched Davan while she listened. When Yessa finished, Sora was still for a long moment. Then she did something that made Yessa go very quiet beside him. The hatchling lowered her head, slowly, with great care, until her nose was almost at the level of Davan's shoulder. She did not touch him, she held there. The warmth of her came off her scales like sunlight off dark stone. Yessa said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "That is the gesture for it doesn't translate directly. The closest is you are seen. It means she has registered you as real, as a specific person, not just a kind of thing." She paused. "Davan, no hatchling has done that to a human in any record I know of." Sora lifted her head again and settled back onto her haunches as if nothing had happened. She looked out over the eastern valley with the calm of something that had done what it came to do. Davan cleared his throat. He straightened his coat. Yessa looked at him sideways. He looked back at her, and she decided not to say anything about the way his jaw was set. They were walking back down the path when boots on stone made them both turn. Rel had come down from her high shelf. She was moving with the slow, enormous care of the very old, but she was moving toward them, which she had never done before. Not toward Davan, not in any record. She stopped within speaking distance. Her pale gold eyes settled on him. Then she spoke in colonial speech. Accented, measured, clearly practiced, she had been learning it deliberately, for a purpose, for who knew how long. "You found her," Rel said. "Good." She held his gaze for a moment. "Now tell your people they should know one of them was remembered." She turned and walked back up to her shelf without waiting for a reply. Davan watched her go. He stood on the path in the cold morning for a little while longer than was strictly necessary. Then he went back to the colony to do what he had been told. Nobody announced it. Nobody sent a formal notice. Davan put a single short message in the colony's general channel, gathering at the South Ridge Lookout, 3rd hour after midday, for a person who used to sit there, come if you want. 23 people came. That was more than Davan expected and less than Kala deserved, but Brix pointed out quietly that 23 was a good number for something that had not been asked of anyone, and Davan decided he was right. It was a flat, windless afternoon, the kind that came twice a year on Vorna when the weather systems balanced themselves out and the world held still. The lookout faced the nesting grounds. Below them, the ridge was warm stone and long grass, and if you knew where to look, you could see the shelf where Sora's nest sat, the hearthstones dark, the gravel smooth, everything quiet. 3 elder Driki were visible on the far rock face, at a distance that was respectful and deliberate. They had come without being asked. Yessa had noticed them arriving before the humans gathered and had said nothing. They positioned themselves where they could see the lookout clearly, and they stayed there without moving, which was itself a kind of attendance. Brix talked first. He stood with his cap in his hands and talked the way he always talked, without build-up, without decoration. He said Kala arrived on the second wave and chose the room that faced the ridge. He said she learned wrong Driki words from a bad file and used them anyway, because she thought trying badly was better than not trying. He said she sat on the path outside the nesting boundary for 3 nights when an egg was struggling, and that she cried when it didn't make it, and that a mother dragon watched her cry and decided something because of it. He said she buried a cache of her things in the rock of the nesting grounds in her first year, before anyone had accepted her, before she had any reason to think it would matter. He said she died of a fever and was gone in 8 days, and he still thought about that sometimes. He stopped talking. He put his cap back on. Oren read from Kala's final archive document. He had printed it cleanly, and his hands were steady until the last 2 lines. Then his hands were less steady, and his voice was less even. He read them anyway. "I stayed because it was right to stay. I hope the ground remembers that." After that, nobody spoke for a little while. The wind that had been absent all day came once, briefly, moved through the grass on the ridge below, and was gone. Yessa explained to the attending Driki, in low Driki speech, what a human remembrance gathering was. She explained that humans gathered near places that had meant something to someone and said that person's name aloud and talked about what they had done, because human memory was short and fragile and needed to be spoken to stay alive. She said this particular gathering was for a woman who had tried to understand the Driki and had done so imperfectly and sincerely, and who had buried her own image in the sacred manner so that the ground would hold her honestly. She did not know if the elders on the far rock needed any of that explained. She said it anyway. It seemed important to say. Sora came down from her shelf near the end. She came slowly, the way young creatures come when they are trying to be careful about something larger than themselves. She stopped at the edge of the natural clearing below the lookout, not in the gathering, but visible to it. She was silver gold in the afternoon light, enormous and quiet. When Oren finished reading, Sora made the sound. The low, vibrating, steady hum, the protective sound, the same one Davan had first heard over the buried gravel of her nest. It moved out from her chest and into the stone of the ridge and up through the lookout platform and into the boots and ribs of every person standing there. It was not a performance. It was not aimed at them exactly. It was simply what she did over things she was keeping safe. Several people did not know what the sound meant, but they felt it and they went still. Bricks, who knew exactly what it meant, looked out at the nesting grounds for a long time after it ended. When he finally spoke, it was to no one in particular. She would have liked that, he said. Everyone who had heard him knew he was not talking about the gathering. Davan walked back through the colony afterward and went to his office, where Oren was already at the desk he had set up in the corner with a fresh file open in front of him. On the cover, in plain block letters, Oren had written, "People Worth Remembering, Vorna Colony Record." Kala's name was at the top. Her entry was longer than a standard colony record. It ended with the line from her final document, the one Oren's voice had struggled with. At the top of the first page, Oren had written the criterion for inclusion. Davan read it. Did they show up? Did they stay? Did they treat the ground as something that would remember them? Davan read it twice. Then he sat down across from Oren and did not say anything for a moment. "It will grow slowly," Oren said. "Good things usually do." Davan looked at the window, which faced the ridge, which faced the nesting grounds, which held somewhere in its stone and gravel the photograph of a woman with a specific face and specific hands who had decided very early on what kind of person she was going to be in this place, and had been exactly that until she was gone. "Put Rel in it too," Davan said, "eventually, when the time comes." Oren uncapped his pen. "I already have the page ready." Below the colony, on her shelf in the late light, Sora curled around her hearthstones and settled into the quiet hum of something guarding something. She did not know all the words yet for what she was doing. She did not need them. The ground knew that was enough.